and a lot of waste going on there, and a lot of long change over time. So we had a good bunch of lean tools applied there also. I also moved around in my leave of absence and sabbatical to back to Egypt, where I'm originally from, and I had some companies there, and it was really kind of amazing to compare between the industrial paradigms in developing and developed kind of countries, and to see how lean can work in any place as long as there is a commitment and a culture endorsement. So with academia and practical experience, I tried to put this into my research also. This is where maybe Eric is speaking about all these long time introduction, because I have a lot of papers that are published in that direction, leanness assessment and performance measurement, and I teach also a lot of courses in that direction. So I tried to put this all together and I try to make this kind of open discussion about what's there concerning performance measurement in general. What do you mean by performance measurement? How do you put this into the lean context? What's there in academia? So what people in academia tend to really do research about, and this will be quickly so that I won't really bore you with that. And I'll also speak about some practical insights of what people do in practice to assess leanness, and any really practical thing that you guys can work out with that. So I'll try to also do this, and then we'll end with final remarks. I always like to ask this question when we speak about leanness assessment, and people usually are very excited about how to apply lean. How can I start my lean journey? How can I make a lot of lean transition in my workplace? But very few people are really focusing and interested in assessing how lean I am, or how much lean I can be, or that system can be. And even this is not just in the practical domain, but also in the academic domain. A lot of papers, a lot of work have been out there to take you step by step, guiding rules in applying TPS or different lean tools and mechanisms, but very few tools and approaches are out there to help you assess how lean you are. And this opened the door for the notion of performance evaluation. Let me spend some time speaking about performance evaluation. It's a very important aspect in any process improvement context, whether Lean, Six Sigma, whether you are a quality personnel or an operational personnel. You definitely need to evaluate how you're doing and how to assess your current activities. So why do we measure? Why do we need to measure ourselves and systems? And a couple of quotes here speaking about measurement can really help you to know where you are and to motivate people that this is how much we are actually achieving. So many efforts are actually not well acknowledged and recognized by managers or by people, because those who put the effort to do these initiatives didn't know how to measure them, didn't know how to quantify them, didn't know how to really portray them in a sense to the managers. And this is why the assessment and the measurement performance is very important. And firms become what they measure, and this is also a very famous quote. And they usually say, what you can't measure, you can't improve. This is also a very realistic quote. You can speak a lot about quick changeover, and you can speak a lot about switching flexibly from one product type to another product type. But if you don't provide numbers in that context, and if you don't provide a percentage of reduced time, then all what you're saying is basically can not make any sense for those who are willing to invest in that. We need to measure that, capture that. So what is performance measurement? Let's give some quick background about that. Performance measurement basically is the process of capturing and trying to quantify efficiency, effectiveness, and capability. And also these three terms many times are mixed around in the manufacturing domain or in the service domain, and people mix them up. And I tried to really pick some simple definitions for these three parameters, or these three KPIs to be more exact. So efficiency or effectiveness it's the measure of doing the right job in the context or in the extent to which stakeholders' requirements are met. So is the job done correctly as the specs, or as people are expecting, or as per the customer requirement? So if you tend to do what's required by the stakeholders, then you have an effective process. But this doesn't mean that you did this in the best way, let me say this, or in the cheapest way. So you can have the highest level of automation, the fastest they can place, for example, a machine in assembling a PCB board or whatever, but and you get it in the specs within tolerance and everything is good, but this costs you a hell of money. So if this done in a very effective, cheap way in a sense, or in the most feasible way, then you are not just efficient, but also, effective, you're also efficient. So efficiency is the measure of doing the same right job, but within a very acceptable economical context. And capability brings to the table a third notion of measurement, which is the ability to do the job from the first place. So it's not just doing it as it should be, as the requirement of the customers, but are you capable of doing that or not? And for those who have been with the process capability calculations with the CP and the CPK, will understand that basically capability is how can you assess the voice of the process, and how can you really look into the process and see whether it's capable of meeting these specs or not, and whether it's capable of producing that volume or not, or whether it's capable of responding to this required mix of products or services or not. So performance measurement or performance measurement systems are systems that try to cater for these three very famous KPIs, or key performance indices: how to measure your efficiency, your effectiveness, and your capability in a very general sense. A good metric, and again, it's very important to understand the notion of metrics and key performance metrics that we are trying to touch on today, because pretty much it will boil down to you trying to design your own customized, applied to your field metrics. So there's nothing on the shelf that you can take it and apply it right away. There are a bunch of simple metrics, as you're going to see, that many people use. But eventually, as processes get complicated and as you advance in your lean journey, you will tend to customize and maybe sometimes develop your own metrics. So it's very important to understand what are the characteristics of a good metric, and how can you design a performance metric to assess your leanness, or whatever performance metric you'd like, or performance measure you'd like to capture. So a good metric should definitely be a meaningful metric and a quantified metric. So something that relates to what you are trying really to measure, and something that can be quantified. It's a performance measure, and this is the most challenging part of most of the KPIs or the performance measurement systems. And as you're going to see, that even in academia, people stumble in trying to depart from the very general qualitative kind of approach into the quantitative domain, where you can really assess and see numbers, or see percentages, or see at least a relative measure from one state to another. So definitely need to be meaningful in the sense that it relates to the field, or to whatever you're trying to capture. If it's something that has to do with quality, or something that has to do with productivity, and it's quantified. And this is not an easy thing, as you're going to see. Very challenging to gather the data, to put the data together, to have the data directly from the workplace, Canva, as they say. Also, metric must present data or information that will allow to take an informative decision, an action that will need to be taken, and this is what the decision support systems and make most of the managers now, and most of the people at the top level management would like to have backed up decision, and decisions that can, or what they call the value of the investment, ROI, investment, or whatever, and the performance metrics with what they offer in terms of concrete achievements, concrete improvements, will help these kind of actions to be, or decisions to be taken. So a good characteristic of the metric that it will lead you to a good investment action, or a good way to move forward. So for example, a metric that capture the efficiency or the availability of a machine. Definitely, when I say that this machine's availability is around 70%, it tells you which direction to go forward. That I would like to work on the maintenance of this machine, on the maintenance system of the facility, so that I can increase the availability and thus the productivity of this line by around 20% or 10%. It's a very meaningful, well-quantified metric that will lead you to a decision how to move forward about improvement. Metrics also should relate the strategy to the core activities, so you can have a lot of good, nice measures and data floating around, but how can you relate these data to the strategic objectives that are set by the company or by your department or by your, for example, yearly development plan of the line. So the good thing and a good metric and a good manager of a performance measurement system would definitely link these metrics all the way up to the general objectives and the strategy of the company. And this is where approaches like balanced scorecards and others come to the picture. They're trying to start by the strategy and cascade it all the way down to every single action. How do they relate to these strategies? The same token applies here to the performance measurement system. If you're looking for something to assess your system and assess your leanness journey, then you need to make sure that these metrics really relate to what strategies you put forward, or what objectives did you put for this for this journey. So, for example, I'm embarking on a lean journey to improve my productivity. Then, would throughput be the best performance metric for this objective? In the lean context, would, for example, producing at the tag time would be the best performance metric for that context. So trying to understand the objective and how these objectives reflect into the goals and the metrics and the measures that you will use, this link is very, very critical. And finally, metrics should really foster the understanding and motivate people for improvement. So once we start to speak the same language of metrics, and that, for example, we need to adjust or improve our inventory turnover, for example, and we would like to reduce the amount of WIP by 20%, 30%. This kind of understanding through these metrics will cultivate a culture of continuous improvement and motivate people to speak the same language and go along the same journey. So these are just some characteristics of a good metric that you can put in the background while designing your own kind of performance measurement system. I also put this together. I'm going to definitely share the presentation with the attendees. So you can also take this table. It's a very nice table on how to design your own performance metric. Again, we're going to look quickly to some examples of what people take out there in academia and practice. But this is for you to design your own kind of performance metric. And again, because as you're going to see, one of the challenges is that there is nothing generic for every application. Manufacturing is different than service. Even in manufacturing, continuous manufacturing is different than discrete manufacturing. Definitely, these are different contexts where you will need to design your own metric. So how to decide on the title of the metric, the objective of that metric, the scope. Very important, what's the scope that this metric will be applied in, the target, the formula, and here comes the sensitives and the intuition of every context, whether it be a mathematical formula or a graphical representation, or how you're going to formulate and capture the data to calculate that metric. What are the units of measure? Very important, and makes big difference in whether you can communicate with others about what you measure or not, the units that you use, the frequency of measurement, and whether this is something that will be on a daily context, weekly. And the notion of frequency, very important when it comes to also the context of lagging and leading metrics. There are metrics that reflect what happened. Usually, and these are the most common metrics, and there are metrics that will help you to kind of speculate and expect what you can do in the future. And these are the leading metrics. So the frequency here is very important. And daily metrics and monthly metrics typically are lagging metrics. They capture data that happened and try to assess a certain level of performance. But they can lead you to some kind of metrics that can expect and forecast how you will perform in the future. You're going to see some of these systems that combine both of them using simulations and others. So this is a nice table also that you can use to develop your own performance metric and assess your whether leanness or performance in general. When we put this general introduction about performance measurement and assessing your performance in general in the lean context and trying to assess leanness, this is something that's not an easy task and been a point of discussion in the academic and in the practical domains for some time due to multiple challenges. The first one is, what really do we measure? What do we mean by leanness in the first place? And is it the waste reduction level? Is it the variation that we are suffering from? Is it the level of how we satisfy our customer requirement or how we cater to our customers? Is it the amount of the number of tools that we apply? Does this reflect the leanness level? Does it speak about how far did we go in our lean journey and did we really switch into lean production or not? All these are questions there when anybody actually speak about leanness. What do you mean by leanness? And it's really challenging. So is it really the end objective of it, or is it the process of it, or am I in a journey and I would like to assess how far did I go through this journey? Also, it's very industry-based, and when you look into assessing leanness in the health sector, different than in manufacturing, different than in the government. People speak about different contexts when it comes to leanness. Nobody will actually debate lean tools, or nobody will speak about general lean principles, like, for example, being just in time or reduce waste or whatever. But when it comes to the leanness level, where people would like to assess themselves, people start to dispute about what do you really mean by leanness and what should we put to assess in that context. Another very important challenge, and this we're going to see the different even examples I'm going to show you, is are we speaking about an overall leanness assessment, or one score kind of thing, one number that will tell me I am 80% lean, I am 70% lean, or are we speaking about different leanness assessment for different sectors, for different departments, for different activities, for different indicators? So this is a very fundamental question, and it's not really clearly answered. People take different takes on that, and maybe we can discuss this after the presentation. So should we really strive for one lean metric or overall number, maybe so that we can benchmark one another through this, or is it more practical and more much easier to really have a leanness score for purchasing, have a leanness score for production, have a leanness score for quality activities or whatever? This is also something that's out there and people are still debating about. Also, one of the challenges that facing the assessing leanness is that the hype and the desire and appetite is not really in measuring the leanness level, rather than going and just spending more effort and money in applying different lean tools and getting more people to be trained and getting more people to apply this tool and this technique and this and that, and very few effort and energy and time are allocated to really put the brakes and say, okay, let's assess where are we and how much did we achieve, and are we really moving in the right direction or not, and what's the direction. If you would like to assess ourselves, which lean metric and which leanness system should we really pick? So it's still not there, and maybe this is why when Eric asked me to give a talk in the context of lean and the lean community, I said maybe this is something that I really see a lot. People don't speak about the leanness level. They always speak about how to apply A3, how to apply SMAT, how to have a good full system. But why are we doing this in the first place, and for how long should we do that? And how can you say that now it's time to really switch or change or stop or whatever? So the hype is not there. This is also a challenge. Definitely, this comes with another challenge of available tools and trainings for that. And people, when we speak about lean assessment in general, they always tell you about benchmarking, which is yes and no. And you can say that benchmarking definitely is kind of an assessment approach. But honestly speaking, benchmarking basically tell you how other people are doing good. but is it really you? And should they be what you're striving for or not? A lot of debates about benchmarking. And definitely in the lean context, where a lot of customization and a lot of really industry-specific things are going on, benchmarking maybe is not the best thing to do when it comes to assessment. Auditing, again, one of the answers that you can get when you ask what you guys do for assessing your leanness. People would say we have quarterly audits. People come and audit us. Auditing definitely give kind of feedback. Yes, sometimes we're closing the loop, as they say, but does it really assess leanness? Depends on the structure of the audit and what we are asking for. And usually, as we all experience, auditing has to do with the streamlining of the processes and whether information are being shared or not, and this and that, but it really doesn't have this technical leanness component unless you design your own tool that will be used by these auditors that are on the frequency of auditing and this and that. Another challenge that comes with assessing leanness is data availability. And the notion of qualitative versus quantitative, it's repeated. I'm going to stress on this many times. Many people, when you ask them, okay, let's go for a leanness assessment tool, and you start to ask about the degree, for example, of reduction in WIP over time, they will tell you, well, we improved a bit, we are doing good, we're doing fine. And people will tend to be very qualitative, and for one main reason, they don't have a system to really capture these kind of data. They have a lot of data about productivity, about this and that, but there are very few, as far as I saw, facilities and businesses that are really capturing data that are oriented to assess their leanness. Also, the notion of the nice sugar-coated numbers that you get from supervisors or from people on the shop floor that many times are either indirect, inaccurate, they are not really what you are asking for, and this is why when they spoke about Gemba Kaizen and that you have to improve while you are on the shop floor, you take the data yourself, you have to stand there, the whole circle phenomenon that we all know about. When it comes to KPIs and measuring for assessment, then also Gemba approach should be applied. You need to know yourself, you need to go and take the measurements yourself that will be fed into the tool and into the performance measurement system, and this is usually not a very welcome task by many people. So all these together makes the notion of assessing leanness is something that's challenging, something that's not that easy. Although you see people saying, okay, well, no, I think we are doing a good job. We have an inventory turnover of this percentage. We have we reduce the cycle time by that amount. So definitely they are part of assessing how good you are doing in lean, but this is the whole story or not. We need really to look into that. So let me share with you, again, I'm not intending by any means to put any equations or any kind of research activities here, but I'll try to be very brief and tell you about what's going on in the academia, the general directions of how people in academia are trying to move forward in leanness assessment. So generally there are the qualitative research, and this is, I can say, for example, 70% to 75% of the research out there are very still in the qualitative zone. And when we say qualitative, we're not talking about very general, fluffy kind of work. It's still has a lot of meat into it, but it's not quantitative, mathematically kind or number-oriented in terms of the output they generate. And they fall into usually one of these three categories. They are very similar in a sense. You find a lot of papers speaking about how to design a questionnaire that can capture leanness level of the facilities. Or putting a checklist, a lot of one of the very famous approaches put 36 items of a checklist. Do you have this, do you have this, do you have this, do you have this, and try to group these 36 lean characteristics into different groups, for example, productivity, quality, purchasing, supply chain, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's the same approach. You're asking questions, you're trying to have the data from people, and based on that data, you're trying to give a certain assessment. Surveys templates and trying to have kind of a unified template for example, the chemical industries, light assembly industries, machining industries, all these things. And you find a lot of papers out there, whether coming from industry itself or from the academic people, about how can you put these templates. And definitely it's a very good effort, and it works to a certain extent. But if we would like to look critically to these approaches, one of the very critical or problematic things about it is, number one, they put kind of predefined characteristics from their own perspective. And who said that these predefined 13, 20, 10, whatever lean characteristics are the characteristics that will assess my lean journey? And what works there, maybe it won't work there. How much updated are these characteristics, and are these technologies that you are trying to assess and capture? Maybe things changed. Maybe the management concept of that principle in the lean area changed 5 years ago or whatever. And for example, a very famous example of that, the OEE, for example, the overall equipment efficiency, and how, for those who apply this in the context, will find that part of calculating the machine availability is the ideal time, and the ideal time is the ideal capacity or productivity time of this machine. And when you really think into this deeply, how would this align with the other lean push into producing at the takt time, and trying to kind of sometimes slow the pace down to be really with the market time, right? The takt or the demand time. And these are two metrics that can look in the lean context as conflicting metrics, the OEE and the takt time. And if you put these in the standard checklist to assess lean, then maybe you're doing injustice for a certain system. So they are good approaches, and they are out there, but definitely again you have to look into them with a very open eye, with a green soup, as they say, to make sure that you can benefit from the goodness there, but it's not just plug and play or cut and paste, as we say. This is just an example of what you can see there from one of these papers. So they look into, for example, a certain dimension or a certain group or a certain cluster of improvement, and then they decompose this into multiple points, and then they ask about how far did you achieve in the lot size reduction, for example, or in the pulling processes, the percentage of processes that switched from push to pull, for example. Another very famous approach is the VSAT developed by MIT. It's very famous in 1995 and 1996. Again, a very well-structured survey. You find a survey about the different categories, and each category is divided into subcategories or sub-concepts, and they start to ask you certain questions, or start to gather some data and put some scores for that, and then based on a pre-assumed or a pre-designed ideal case, they tell you about the gap and what's going on and how far you need to improve and in which areas. So yeah, they are definitely part of it. It's a lean assessment process, no doubt about that. But again, this is what everybody should be doing, or should we take this study and analyze it, adjust it, and customize it to our context? But in general, it's there, and a lot of research has been done to improve this and to apply this to different case studies. And it's a very famous example of the questionnaire-like qualitative assessment. In the academia, when we look into the quantitative approaches, directions, there are mainly 3 directions that can gather around 80% of the papers out there. The most famous quantitative approach are the fuzzy based approaches, and this is usually what people in academia tend to use in any problem they face when it holds a lot of qualitative issues. So for example, if I like to capture customer satisfaction, this is something that's very fuzzy, I mean very qualitative. I don't know that there are really no concrete numbers in many cases to catch that, so they tend to use fuzzy theory and defuzzification approaches, where you try to translate these general good, bad, or okay, average kind of data available into some kind of fuzzy sets, and using and then defuzzifies that to translate this into a score or a certain number that's aggregated from different levels. Another direction, I'm going to also give a simple example from each one of them. Another example is the analytical-based approaches, where mathematical formulations are done, and optimization techniques, and a lot of work have been done in that direction. It's good for publishing papers, but practically speaking, when I shared some of these things with people in real practice, they tend to either say that it's very exhaustive, or or it's not relevant to what they are actually doing. And definitely people in industry would like to see performance metric that's very handy, very easy to apply, and anybody across the line of work can capture and deal with. But they are there, and they give good insights, they open the eyes to the different directions where to assess, and they are out there. The most common metrics that migrated from academia to real practice are the simulation-based approaches, where basically a lot of simulation modeling and a lot of simulation analysis are done offline, and then they are migrated. They develop general tools where they can easily take data from different facilities and different industries and give you the assessment metric or the assessment level that you're looking for. An example of the fuzzy approach, this is again a typical way they decompose the problem into multiple groups or areas of improvement, suppliers, for example, issues, investment priorities, lean practices, production, whatever, and they start to generate or ask for some questions, gather some data, and try to generate different fuzzy numbers or migrate this into fuzzy sets, and normalize the different answers they get from different people, so that they can avoid this kind of different experienced, non-experienced people, and try to work with the results of the surveys in a way that they avoid errors and ensure repeatability kind of, and they aggregate that into some fuzzy set calculations. They defuzzifies that to migrate from the general qualitative answers to quantitative answers, and then they give you one leanness index. It's kind of a simple road map. Most of the fuzzy-based approaches follow this kind of map, and they end up from the decomposed approach of assessing different lean activities at different sectors or different departments into one leanness index or one leanness score. And this can be very appealing to a lot of people, especially at the high level, to compare, for example, from one facility to another facility, to compare over years. Very easy to grasp as one number, one leanness index. How much is it really a reliable one? This is definitely depends on how much you succeeded to mitigate the subjectivity of all these data gathering and the fuzzy answers that you get between average and good and not that good or whatever, and how much your approximation, your fuzzy sets that you're using, the fuzzy functions, triangle or whatever, that also hold a lot of approximation. All these things add to the uncertainty of that final leanness index. But again, it's always a trade-off between the easiness of evaluation and having one number versus how accurate that number is. This is just an example of another approach, for example, in academia, about how to use optimization techniques, where basically they use something called the data development analysis. They assume kind of an ideal optimal front of performance, and then they calculate the current performance, and they say that this gap between the ideal and the current is the way to go about it. And this and how to migrate from here to there is done through optimization techniques to give you an optimal roadmap how to move from the less lean state into a closer state to the ideal state by minimizing this distance or whatever. It's again an optimization technique that try to capture the current status and give you a roadmap to how far you can be lean. So this is your maximum leanness dream in a sense, and this DEA approach can tell you how you are migrating from here to there over time, assessing your leanness journey in a sense. Simulation is the very famous examples that are really taken from academia to practice, and this is an example of discrete event simulation by folks from Texas, University of Texas. And generally they managed to compile a very good database of different lean indicators and guidelines to different lean situations, and they start to categorize different systems. For example, job shop versus indicated lines versus flexible lines, changeable lines, or whatever, assembly versus machining. And they take basic info of what type of system you are, with some detailed info about using surveys about your current production status, quality status, or whatever, and try to create a roadmap using some kind of intelligence at the back end of that simulation, running multiple simulation runs for systems that mimic your system, mimic your performance, and try to put forward a roadmap of what your current lean score based on the assessment, what are the urgent targets that you need really to work on and to hit on quickly, and a general improvement guideline. This is a summary of something like 5-6 years project, and it's nice. It's when you look into the results, they are very attractive results. But again, this is for you or not. This is something that we really capture the right system and give the right info so that you can trust all these guidelines coming from there. It's a question that's there, and you can definitely visit the work and see what's going on. This is another example. This is actually my work with one of my students trying to do the same kind of capturing leanness level, but try to incorporate a lot of the dynamic issues that are going on. That's why we use system dynamics, where we assumed a lot of changing in the cycle time, a lot of changes in the quality level, and we tried. It looks complicated, but it's much easier than how it looks. All these L's are just simple relations, and we try to capture simply the overall width efficiency and the overall surface level efficiency by capturing the backlog, and the overall equipment efficiency by the typical approach that we all know. And we try to have manufacturing leanness score, one score that actually, with all these dynamics going on, if the machine breaks, if the quality is bad, if whatever, a lot of scenarios, and we try to predict some good policies for lean practitioners to follow if they are really keen about assessing their leanness level. And again, it's just an example of using simulation, but this is a continuous domain system analysis, continuous domain simulation for that context. So now migrating and trying to really not to go get you bored with the academic kind of context, let's move into some examples of what's going on in the lead practice, what people out there in the industry do to assess their leanness in a sense. And I'm going to share with you also 2 or 3 tools that I feel they are really nice and practical you can try to apply. I'm not putting down academia as an academic person, but I'm trying really to give you the cool pictures in a sense. So in general, the typical general metrics that are used out there in industry to assess leanness are many people use the simple 7 waste kind of reduction kind of approach, where they say we had this amount of wasted time, there were this amount of wasted motion or whatever, and we improved this by that much. And it's a metric there, definitely captures part of the improvement that you did, but this is the leanness level that you are trying to really achieve and move forward and justify more investment in it. Definitely it's much more than that. Also reduce time. A lot of people focus on time, and definitely in manufacturing time is very important, and service, in every context time is very important. That's why you have the value added over the non-value added ratio as a metric, the cycle time reduction, the treatment time, for example, in the health sector. So time in general is a very famous performance metric, but it's a single metric that stands out there. And is it informative enough? Is it directive enough? Is it motivating enough? it's there to capture something, but you definitely need to be part of another or bigger holistic approach of assessment. Number of events. This is the typical HR kind of performance metric approach. They say, okay, how lean you are. The answer would be, we actually have 20 Kaizen events that we conducted last year. We had 3 on-site trainings and 1 workshop attended and whatever. So we had a lot of experts or consultants coming down and doing a lot of Kaizen events and a lot of lean events. So the number of events, this is something that you hear a lot when you ask people about how do you measure their leanness. But this is really a reflection? It's a question there. And the typical question that follows this, how many of these events were really fruitful? How many of them really matured into something that improved the system? The number is good, and the higher the numbers, this is something can be good, but maybe if this is too big of a number and the output is really small, then actually you are doing the exact opposite of what lean is actually preaching for. The number of trained workers is another also leanness metric that you will find out there people are using in the industry. And they say, well, last year we trained around 20 workers or technicians or supervisors, and this year we are aiming for another 10 or another 30. And we say that this is reflect the leanness level. Maybe if it can reflect your eagerness, your endorsement of the lean journey, but does this reflect leanness? I definitely doubt that. Financial savings is also, and again you can see different metrics for different angles, depending on whom you're asking. So financial savings is another leanness metric that people will tell you we are doing fine in the lean, because since we started our lean journey, we saved 10% of the overall production cost, or we saved 20% in our quality rework activities, or whatever. And you'll find all the people speak about these financial savings as a lean metric, but again, in which context and this is what you were originally aiming for or what. So these are generally what you will see out there. And again, to put them into categories, people usually think about leanness level either from a process performance perspective, so they are trying to see how much the process became leaner in a sense and better. So they use value stream map, resource planning tools, all these things. And some people, when you ask them about leanness assessment, they look into the material replenishment kind of perspective. So how the inventory turnover, the WIP reduction, the material flow, the Kanban system, all these things. And some will look into the organizational performance, the enterprise in general, and the training level, the Kaizen events, and these things. And I was actually, when I did this exercise with other colleagues, trying to see how people think about leanness measurement, very few of them gave us some real customer-oriented KPIs, like, for example, value delivered to the customers' appreciation, customer loyalty, as if they tend to fail to see the link between how lean you are and how customers are satisfied. You really manage to cater for the value required by the customer and what they are really looking for. But in general, these are the things that when you look into, when you see what's going on out there and how people answer the question of how do you really assess your leanness, it falls in one of these categories. So let me share with you also some practical things that tools that are out there, and some people successfully manage to implement them to assess their leanness, and they are good. One of them is, and one of the very famous ones, is the one by the Session of Manufacturing Excellence, the NE, and I got a copy of that here, just to take you through it and see how people think about it. So here it is. This is one Excel sheet for around 15 lean practices, and for every lean practice of these practices, they actually offer a clear scoring scheme from 0 to 5 for every one of them. So you'll end up 5 times 15, 75 as an overall score. And for every scoring bracket, they give you kind of benchmark of how to put a certain score about it, and they speak about what do they really mean by, for example, in this context, leadership commitment, and what do they mean by participating, aligning, continuing, because if they are participating, you're going to put this score, if they are aligning, you're going to put another score, if they are educating, you put another score. If you look, for example, to change over time, for example, or set up reduction, again, this is the different score brackets up to 5, and then we start to speak about operation, why change over time and reduction of setup time is important, and what do they mean by standard process or procedure there, or measuring and tracking, and we start to put some percentages. If the answer is within that bracket of percentages, then this is the grade you take. Try to put as much control as they can in the numbers that will be filled in these brackets, so that the overall score would be something kind of comparable when you compare one facility to another using the same tool. So it's a nice effort, definitely a lot of work, putting details for all the 15 categories. And then you end up, for example, if you have, for example, it's up to 5, so if you fill it, for example, this is going to be 3, 4, 2, 5. You can see that the grade basically try to tell you on average how are you performing, and you can compare these output for yourself across different, for example, quarters, or with across different facilities if you would like to compare how you perform to others. So it's a nice, supposedly easy to be applied tool, well detailed, well decomposed, trying to have clear guidelines how to use it, and it's out there. Many facilities try to use that in the automotive industry. Up in Detroit, for example, a lot of people use this tool to compare the same facility for different facilities for the same company, for GM or whatever. I saw this, and it's people are happy with it. So I said I shared that one practical tool. Another tool also is a tool extracted from a book named Winning with Operational Excellence, and it gained some reputation. And it's again, it's an Excel sheet trying to make it very easy for people. They selected 10 categories of lean activities: customer metrics and performance, factory metrics, go for workflow, for example, TPM and machine maintenance, quality, different categories, and for every category, we have again a score or a grading scheme in a sense, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and acceptable, and we tell you in that category, this is unacceptable, this is okay, and how to put the scores, and at the end you add up all the scores that you got for these 10 categories, but are decomposed into much more detailed subcategories, and you end up with a score, with a number, right? You can end up with a number for a certain category, and you compare this category over time, and you can add up all the numbers you'd like to have an overall score. So trying to balance between the overall score versus the detailed kind of department by department score. So this is also out there as a clear example of how people in industry try to be very practical and at the same time as accurate as possible, and touching on many of the lean things. This is a very nice tool. They call it Read the Plan Fast by Goodson. It's in a book, and also it's available on the internet. He tried to be very fast in terms of, he was inspired by, when he used to be the facility manager of one of these factories, and he got a visit from a Japanese crew, and he only toured, he asked to tour the facility, so they didn't want really to let them see what's going on. He was not ready or whatever, so he gave them the tour only in 10 minutes, quickly, a quick tour, and he expected that the report basically would be just very short, no details. It's only 10 minutes kind of a tour, and he was shocked by the amount of details that these people got by touring in 10 minutes what's going on. And he said that this inspired me to develop something called read a plan fast. He developed 20 questionnaires, yes or no answers. So there's no 10%, 20%, 30% like the previous ones. It's yes or no. And he took these yes or no's answers for these 20 questions, and he categorized them to 11 categories, trying to put score to depending on how many yes each of these categories got, and you will end up with one score out of 121. It's a simple, and he said that this is very good for a tentative lean assessment, or a quick lean assessment, just a tool. He said that you can do the tool in 30 minutes on the facility and answer these questions, and you can have a quick lean assessment tool out there. Simple one, you can have it as a trial. These are the 20 questions, and this is the grade that will be actually take these results and put it there. So this is also out there. The very famous balance scorecard, he used it in assessing the leanness, not just in putting strategies and in the business context, but also many companies use that in the lean context. But again, just pay attention that I believe that balance scorecards are really reports for progress of improvement, and they don't really tell you how lean you are, and unless you really change the target every now and then, and you put a certain target and you start to cascade the different activities to achieve that target, then they help you in the lean journey. But would they really assess the leanness? For me, I'm doubting that, but it's out there, and 50% of the US companies use balance scorecard one way or another, so it's definitely something that's been widely verified by many people. This is for the service context. I'm trying to increase my manufacturing bias, but in the service context, this is a very famous book that houses a tool for lean office or office Kaizen. And the guy, Bill Rowe, he picked 20 different aspects of lean in offices, in office context, service or whatever, and for every one of them he put 20 keys with 5 categories. So every category, so the overall score for every key parameter or key category in the lean will have a score of 100 as an optimal score. And you start to score yourself in every single subcategory in that category, how much I'm doing in level 1, level 2, level 3, level 5, describing every level of these levels as we saw in the manufacturing examples. And you give yourself, for example, in the HR department on the leanness score, you have, from here, for example, you have 30 out of 100. Why? Because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11 times 1 is 11. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 times 2, 16, plus 11, 27, and you have only 1 and 3, so 27 plus 3 is 30. So your performance in the HR as one category of the leanness in office or Kaizen in office is 30 out of 100. This is your leanness level. Go ahead, put your new target and put your plan how to improve that. So this is also another tool out there. It has some popularity. Some people apply that in offices and government context. And check it out, it's a good one. Well, there are a lot of other things. I just tried to grab some examples to just give you the feeling of what's going on out there in leanness assessment. There's the Kobayashi 20 keys, where this is a new Japanese release of lean, how can you improve your leanness level. It's more a lean journey directed assessment, but he touched on the assessment, how to measure these different 20 keys. The Shingo Prize assessment, for those who know about the Shingo Prize and how you nominate your company or a company, there's an assessment criteria that assess how lean you are. So some people took that and said, okay, we will assess our leanness based on the criteria set by the Shingo Prize competition. And it's a very thorough one and aggressive one, so definitely it's a good one to start with. There's the performance scorecards. It's a book by Chang and Morgan, Measuring the Right Things and the Real World. Some of my colleagues, consultants actually told me that it's a very good book for leans. I didn't read it all, I just went through it quickly. It looks nice, but it's there just for your reference. So just I have 2 more minutes to finish on time, so let me give my final remarks on that in general. About assessing leanness, I hope I didn't really put you to sleep, but the first point I'd like to highlight before I leave you guys is that the overall assessment is better or the decomposed kind of department-oriented assessment. It's a question that people will argue about, and it's your call. Sometimes on a strategic level you need these consolidated, aggregated numbers, and many times when you go down in the hierarchy, you need really department-oriented, process-oriented kind of metrics that assess certain aspects of mean. But as you saw, there are a lot of tools that try to do both together. So this is a question that will always remain open there. I always like to acknowledge that outcomes are very difficult to measure and to capture, and there are always a lot of outcomes that can't just be in numbers. So qualitative approaches are important, and they need to be there, and not everything can be measured. This is why I say don't be fooled by numbers, and don't get trapped into numbers. Many times when people push to certain methods, I have a colleague that's still working in R&D, Chrysler. He told me that Chrysler, when they were bought by Fiat 5-6 years ago, he's telling me that the R&D department had this new Italian manager who were pushing them for Kaizen events, and their evaluation is just based on the number of Kaizen events that they will do. And every engineer has to do Kaizen events that will save money as much as up to his salary, otherwise he will be in trouble or whatever. So he told me that we are now in a mood where we're trying really to not fake Kaizen events, but just try to get them done one way or another, and that's it. Sometimes when you are really into numbers only in terms of leanness assessment and this and that, you miss the point. And there's a lot of things that need to be part of the assessment, like the culture, like the endorsement level of workers and this and that, and they are very difficult to capture by numbers. So as much as we are pushing for numbers and leanness assessment, as much as we acknowledge that there's another side of leanness assessment that maybe is not for numbers, but at least very difficult to capture by numbers. Remember again, the assessment, very important when it comes to assessment and numbers. We're going to speak about numbers. Then again, go and measure it yourself, get it yourself. Don't just aggregate numbers from Excel sheets sent to you, or just numbers coming here and there by emails. You need validate numbers, be on the shop floor getting these numbers by yourself. And this is what I would like to leave you with: adapt, adopt, and apply. You need to adapt whatever you'd like to see good, or you can relate to, adopt it to your own context and to your own industry, apply it and validate it, give back, and getting numbers from there. And nothing is permanent, nothing is perfect. This is a logo that you should really hold in your lean journey. A lot of things out there, but you're the driver and you're the one who's going to do this last. Thank you very much, and I hope that I didn't really take more time and put you to sleep. Thank you.